On this episode of Eager to Know, a unique aspect of how we experience the art of music, seeing criticism as a gift, and I learn about the term music husbands. We all have a creative part of our brain, whether we use it or not, for generating new ideas, problem solving, and just viewing ourselves in this world. I am Ricky McGeckran, an artist living in Chicago, and I am eager to know and share with you all how people of a creative leaning have brought this way of thinking to the forefront and how it has shifted outcomes. A few weeks back, a friend of mine invited me to be his guest at a record release party for a band I knew nothing about. I didn't know what to expect, and as these things happen, I was pleasantly surprised and immediately made a connection with the music. It was a folk rock duo called They Won't Win, and that evening I was able to experience their songs, but also hear them tell the personal experiences that inspired their creation. I wanted to know more, and that night they accepted my invitation to be a guest on Eager to Know. I have since been listening to their first full-length album titled Lost at Sea. I came into our conversation viewing this as a wonderful album created by a duo of talented musicians. But after spending time with Greg and Danny, I see these men and what they created in an entirely different way.
Just a little longer, just a little longer. You watch, you wait. Just a little longer, just a little longer. Till Judgment Day. And you wake to find everything you wanted and everything you got look the same inside. And you're everything you would believe. Everything you wanted and everything you got look the same inside. And you're everything.
So that was the track Everything from your first full-length album, Lost at Sea. First of all, do you guys have a president of your fan club?
That's hilarious.
It'd probably be our partners. I don't know.
Matthew's probably president and Bernard is vice president.
I think so. Matthew's definitely the events chair.
All right. Well, I definitely need to get involved. So tell me, I want to know about the origin of that song. To me, it kind of is about looking outside of yourself. I see it as looking outside of yourself for meaning and value, and ultimately seeing that it is inside yourself.
That's pretty good.
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's funny because sometimes we play around with our harmonies sort of represent different parts of a story, and so in this song in particular, we realized halfway through that my sort of weaving in and out of Greg's lead vocals is kind of me playing the role of Greg's sort of inner self, sort of almost telling him, like, or telling yourself, like, you got this, you're going to be okay.
And it started out as this sort of affirmation song, right? You can get there, and you can get past, whatever comes your way. It was kind of just that almost like a self-help moment, right? But then as we got into it, we realized that often that moment is triggered by yourself. It's not actually triggered by outside events. It's not triggered by others. It's actually yourself looking yourself in the mirror and saying, I want to get past this. I need to get past this.
Yeah. It sounds like a lot of these songs would require a lot of life to be lived and a lot of experience in order to, like, I don't think these could be written by an 18-year-old.
He's just calling us old.
Which is true. I think it's one of the things we're actually excited about with this album is that it took us a while to make. B, we're musicians of a certain age in our 40s, right? And I think you're right. I think we wanted to bring to these songs some real lessons learned and some real life. And I think you're right. I don't think you can just pick that up and pretend it, right? You have to live it to feel it, to write this kind of stuff.
And I mean, we did a lot of talking through the writing process. It wasn't as if the lyrics just sort of came out. There was a lot of asking each other, sort of probing each other. What is this song really about? What are we really trying to say? And so there were many late nights spent just sort of reminiscing and sort of talking about really difficult stuff and amazing stuff. And it's been quite the incredible process, sort of working together.
So how does it work in terms of, does one of you take the lead and then the other person supports the other one on a particular song? Or is it just a 50-50? Like, tell me about how that works.
It's actually part of the fun we have with, again, kind of back to our vocals. Danny and I do a lot of play with that. Who's going to take the lead, song structure of, hey, this is a locked Simon and Garfunkel style harmony song where we're really kind of singing the same thing, and we're trying to be one voice just in these kind of locked harmonies. Other times, like in everything we just talked about, the harmonies are playing different roles in terms of who sings quote unquote lead. Or a lot of our songs don't have a lead per se because the harmonies are so locked in that kind of Simon and Garfunkel Indigo Girls way. But when we do, it's a mix. Some of the songs I'll kind of take the lead part of the story, and some of the songs, in fact, the songs I think we're playing today, I'm lead, quote unquote, lead on everything. And I think on Lost at Sea, Danny, right. I think we're playing Lost at Sea. Danny's the lead.
Yeah. In terms of the writing process, do you mean?
Yeah, I guess, because I think you were talking about, on the writing process.
Yeah. So I think in terms of the writing process, Greg and I go very much sort of go back and forth. So sometimes, so jumping into Lost at Sea, for example, Greg had this melody that you just couldn't get out of your head, I remember, and you sort of would play it, but it was sort of started off as a hum. And then the way I think of it is sort of Greg gifted me the melody and said, find lyrics for this.
Interesting.
And so that's like one way that we would write. Another way might be that melody and lyrics will come out at the same time, and then we might share that with each other and give really honest feedback, and then maybe then sort of hand it over, sort of pass the baton, and the next person would then take the sort of a next round and rewrite it, write a bridge. We like to experiment with all different approaches.
That sounds like a really intimate relationship. And from reading, on your website, I saw the Our Story page. It sounded like you guys, your friendship was fairly new when you started getting into a musical relationship, and it just sounds very intimate. How does that work?
Well, it's funny you say that because our partners, Matthew and Bernard, call us music husbands, and they're pretty comfortable with that. You know what I mean? Because it almost takes this intimate relationship with songs like this to go there together, because it's super vulnerable, it's super scary, it's beautiful, it's releasing, it's all these things that you would use those adjectives in an intimate relationship, right? So it's funny you say that. There
are some moments that come to mind in the studio when we're still kind of writing in the studio. You get in, you think you know what you're going to put into the songs, and then you hear them and you make changes. But there were moments where I think we kind of went beyond just recording, where we have moments where the meaning of the song would hit us, and I don't know, almost in a moment forgot that we're in a studio, and we would have these just moments of our friendship where we'd just sort of stop and think and talk for a moment. It must have been interesting for the for the Gravity Studios team to
the other people involved.
Right.
I do have questions about that because I'm an artist, but I'm a painter, and so I work by myself, and I'm really not dependent on other people. How does it work with, this is more of a technical question as opposed to a creative question,
Yeah.
but obviously you have a bunch of work that you've done yourself, and then you have to rely on a production team.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that work? Do you have to be very connected with them creatively? How do you convey to them what your vision is? Because they're executing it, right?
Yes, and so we developed a process that we really loved in the studio that we called discovery sessions. And so Danny and I would bring our song to the day, right? And everything being a good example. And
what would you bring? What
we would bring 2 voices and an acoustic guitar. And we would play the song for our musicians, our colleagues in the studio, our friends. And we would say, kind of, here's the emotion of the song, here's what it is about. And then we would create some room for play. And so, and what we mean by that is we would just say, okay, let's play this together with that in mind. You've heard kind of the nature of the song, the basics of the song, the directionality of the song. And then we would play and we would all listen. It was a very active listening process. And then at moments, we kind of got this process down, and there'd come this moment often where the song would kind of then reveal itself to us, and we'd say, oh, there it is.
Yeah.
And we all felt, it wasn't just me and Danny. It wasn't just our song at that point. It was all of our song, because we had just created the sound of, the story was ours, but that's the sound of the song was something that was absolutely created collaboratively.
Yeah, a trick that I think we learned halfway through, because it took us 2 years. We're 2 years in the studio, pretty much. And something we learned, and this kind of cuts across many of the tracks, is we would be discovering and trying to figure stuff out, and then we'd realize that one particular instrument represented a particular part of the story. And so there were lots of one-on-one conversations with Kai on cello or with Ben on piano, where we'd say, Kai, in this story, you are that person trying to get out of this, or you are this, you are, or even you're part of the scenery. So in Leaving London, imagine that you are the cobblestone streets and the rain falling, and so we would give a lot of the time. Sometimes it was just technical. It would be play this chord or play this note, but sometimes it was just play this feeling. And we, I guess, learned to just trust each other as a team to sort of allow each musician to interpret what that might mean.
So that's incredible. Was that, I mean, do you have a background in music at all? Or was that you were just having a conversation about what the feelings, and you were sort of trusting that they would be able to interpret that musically?
Yeah. I don't have a background in music, like in any formal way. I've always been involved in
right.
Yeah.
Loved music and just always been in a band at some point in my life.
I have a little bit more formal musical training than Danny, but very, very similarly, it was more about trusting our instincts. And again, I think that's where the maturity comes in, that we just said, hey, we're going to give ourselves permission to take the reins here. But we also had Julian Stacy, who was our producer, who was an amazing collaborator, who helped not just push us technically, and he's an amazing sound engineer, but he's also a storyteller, and he's also, and that would be the punctuation I would make to what Danny was saying, is if there was one thing we kept reminding ourselves is what is the story here? How are we coming back to the story? How are we reinforcing the story? How is the cello representing a part of the story? We were pretty in our heads about it.
We might not be classically trained musicians, but we're both artists and designers in other aspects of our lives. So I think I can speak for myself, but I also see it in Greg. It's like sort of Greg's like design hat and sort of your sort of the way you see the world and your aesthetic almost comes through in sort of just through the music. I can't even find the way to express it.
No, I know exactly what you're saying, and I think it makes it, those conversations are easier if you have a creative mindset. You can have those types of conversations with a musician about making the translation between what you're feeling and what you're trying to express. I think having that conversation with a musician, you could have the same conversation with a visual artist probably. You know what I mean? Because your brain is wired that way. That's what I think.
Right.
So I'm an oil painter. So the idea of having something in my brain and then creating it and having the world receive it, I'm very familiar with, what that feels like. But I feel like with music, I feel like it's a whole nother level, because I feel like music touches people at a much deeper, visceral, primitive way. It must be amazing to create something like you have and to have people receive it and to observe that. Like, tell me about that.
It's the best part of the whole process, right? Early on, we realized, obviously, songs are meant to be heard. It's a relationship, right, with a creation and a listener, and people. We often talk about it now that the songs are made. They don't belong to us, right? They belong to anyone. It actually makes me want to cry a little bit. It's like they belong to anyone who listens to them and has any sort of reaction to them. And the reason I'm crying is recently one of the songs deals with some pretty tough stuff that happened in my life related to some domestic violence. And it was a very scary story to tell for me. But then to have a woman in California who had been passed on this song from a friend and had kind of heard some of the backstory of it, tell me that this song really touched her and that she was carrying it with her in her heart because she was in a similar place, and it gave her some hope that she could get to the next chapter. There's nothing more powerful than feeling something like that or hearing something from another human being when you've put yourself out there like that.
I didn't know that happened.
Wow, that's amazing.
That's amazing. That is amazing. So I to build on what Greg is saying about connecting to people and having them hear it, that's why we create anything, isn't it? I mean, on the one hand, we do create it for ourselves,
mm-hmm.
right? But that really has to only be half of the creative experience. The other half is other people absorbing what you've created and having it change them in some way. Not that we have an agenda, not that we're trying to change people in particular ways, because we can't control that.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea that we can create something that someone else finds beautiful or thought-provoking or deeply even sad, mm-hmm. or cathartic in some way, I think that's what the human experience is supposed to be. I think that's why we're all supposed to be in the world, to just connect with each other, and this is just one way to do that.
A very effective way.
I was just going to say, it's been very fun watching the kind of, I'm fascinated by the like butterfly flaps its wings notion, right? And it's been fun to have the random connections with, I mentioned this one woman who had written me, but just to see the ways that friends and family connect with it, because that's your first circle, right? Mm-hmm. And to see how they actually get to know you in new ways through this. And you thought, oh, of course my friends and family know my stories. One of the biggest ideas here that was fascinating for me by doing this is learning, like, actually our friends and families, when we tell our stories, benefit as well, because we, I think, assume our inner circles know a lot more about us than they actually do.
So this was a way for you to sort of become more intimate with people in your in your life. It was because it was a new way for you to express things that it sounds like you may not realize you hadn't expressed.
Exactly. I think we all assume, oh, my friends and family know everything about me, when in truth, there's a lot we hide, right? There's a lot we don't share and I think songwriting allows you to go into a different space of sharing, and that was part of the satisfaction.
He saw me on the shore, I saw him next to me. What we were fighting for, no one could see. Lost in some secret storm, he takes the siren, I steal the crown. If I were to drown with him, let me drown. And we sang, keep it together. Oceans forever, he promised me. Bridges burn, just you and me, lost at sea. Keep it together. Oceans forever, he promised me. Every time, all bridges burn, just you and me, lost at sea.
So that was Lost at Sea, which is the title track. The lyrics in that are pretty rich. I mean, there's a lot in those lyrics, I feel. He saw me on the shore, I saw him next to me. That says a lot, those two lines. Can you tell me about the background of that? I think I know what it might be about, but I'd love to hear.
So this was that song that Greg had in the melody in his head and gifted me and said, put some lyrics to this. And it was literally, I was on a boat with my family on vacation, and I had the melody going sort of around and round in my head, Greg's humming. And I had this picture of this sort of voice, these guys, two guys, so maybe one was me and an ex, or just two guys across an ocean, sort of calling out to one another, and they could hear each other's echoes but couldn't quite see each other, and started to sort of just get some rough lyrics down that I immediately shared with Greg when I got back, and then we did a deep dive and sort of and really tried to figure out, okay, there's something here, there's a story that's both sort of in us that we need to tell.
I would just expand on that. I think one of the most interesting things about Lost at Sea's lyrics is that it brings in a lot of different pieces of things that Danny and I like. We like really mythic imagery. We both kind of grew up on, across the Atlantic Ocean from each other. We both grew up on Clash of the Titans and loving it, and but
I've never thought of us, like, we literally grew up like across a sea.
Right.
That's crazy.
That's kind of good.
That's good.
We should keep that. But then we also admit to each other, we both had a crush on Perseus, and and there's all of that baked into this story about longing, about loss, about wanting to be lost with someone and be away from the rest of the power of saying I want to be lost with someone to us was a really, really key idea of the song. We tried to capture that feeling.
And I remember when we landed on the lyric "Lost at Sea," and you said to me, let's make sure that it's clear that in this case, being lost is a really magical, wonderful thing, even though there are moments in the song that this is not a perfect love affair by any means, and
Right.
it's also it's a love that has been lost and it's in the past, which we both have experienced in our lives. And maybe this is why it's the final track. It's almost us saying, "Hey, yeah, there are difficult times we go through, but there's no reason why those hard things can't also be wonderful things that become part of us going forward."
Yeah, one of the first line in the song is "Careful what you believe," which that really stuck with me because, you know, I personally think that what you believe structures your entire reality and your life. It's so powerful. And so that's what got my attention initially with this song, was that initial lyric.
It's also kind of this warning about, we see it as this kind of come closer listener moment, you know what I mean? But then careful what you believe. It's this cautionary tale about storytelling, the stories we tell ourselves, the lies we tell ourselves, the truths we're afraid to believe. You know, there's all of that baked in there. And once we got going, we were really feeling this song was this was, you know, you talked about being a painter, right? And we all know there's different styles of painting. There's very photorealistic painting, there's figurative painting, there's all manner of different styles. In the same way, some of our songs, War, I will use as an example, is a little bit more of a straightforward, like, here is a story song. This is an honest depiction of something that happened, right? Lost at Sea is a little bit more of a figurative painting.
It's more loose.
It's loose, and it's meant to be so that the listener can go in from all manner of angles and experience it and feel it in different ways, but hopefully with that mood we are trying to convey of the magic of the sea and being lost and the beauty of lost love.
Right. If there was one song on the album that I think we don't really quite grasp what it's about, it's this song. So the fact that you're asking us is not surprising, because maybe it's the fuzziest.
I think we're still learning about it too, which is interesting to say, right? Yeah. It is done, and it's birthed. We're happy with it.
Yeah.
But it's okay to say maybe that we're still learning what it's about too, as we hear how people connect with it.
That's interesting. And that brings up another question that I had. Obviously, you are intimately involved in every aspect of this, and then you produce the album and you feel like you know it. Now that it's out there and you are experiencing it somewhat through other people, has that changed how you view the work?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
The most surprising thing so far, and I'm sure there's going to be lots more surprises along the way, the most surprising thing so far is how people are describing the feeling of listening to it. And I think it's because when we were writing the songs and when we were recording the songs, we're telling our own very personal stories, whether we experienced them or witnessed each other go through them. And so if we're really honest, there's a lot of sadness and rage and hope inside every song in some way. And something we did not expect people to say was how calming the album was and how peaceful. And that for me, we
chill.
Talked about chill. We're like, what? Really?
I would use the word healing.
Huh.
Like,
Wow.
I feel like it brings up all of that stuff that you just described, but it's done in a way that feels safe.
Mm-hmm. And I think
Wow.
I think it's also the release of it. As you're talking, I think what people are experiencing, I think it's cathartic, and I think healing's a great word. I think it's powerful when you bear witness to someone go through a journey that has the valley and they get to the other side, right? It's the underdog story. We root for people, right? we root for them to get to the other side of the valley, right? And so I think maybe while we can go in and feel these intense things about the lyrics of the songs and the stories of the songs, I would hope that that's what that means, that people are, there's that release of it. There's that the beauty of getting to the other side, maybe.
I love that. I think we also, along the whole process, we kept coming to the point that we knew that we were creating something that we would both love to discover. We were creating something that we each wanted to discover rather than predict how people might respond or what we should create. So our test of whether or not we'd found our sound or found the right lyric was, do we find that beautiful? Does it make us want to, like, does it give us chills? Does it make us want to just listen and listen? So I think part of the journey of creating the whole album was this sort of quest, if you like, of finding beauty for ourselves. And we almost had, like, we allowed each other to veto stuff. So if we weren't both 100% behind what we had just put together, if one of us had even an inkling of doubt, even if the other, so if I loved something and if Greg was like, something isn't quite right, I had to be willing to let go of my love of that moment to find the version of that both Greg and I would absolutely
sounds like a musical marriage. Sounds like a musical marriage.
I guess it is.
Yeah.
So this was your first album, which to me means this is the first time you've experienced this process at this level of intensity. Was it an easy transition to go from whatever you were doing with your brain before you did this to doing this quite a bit? I guess a lot of hours.
Yeah.
Was it a ramp up, or did you just jump in? Did it take a while to figure out?
I'm guessing, like any creative process, any creative medium, you go through writers, painters, everyone. We all go through. It's a sine wave, right? It's not. I know very few creatives who are kind of, I hit optimal, production capacity, and I kind of stay right there evenly through until the thing is done. Ours was a roller coaster like everyone else's. And so the answer is yes. And there were times, I think we jumped into it with our whole hearts for sure. But there were times where we were tired. Life gets in the way. We both have pretty intense jobs. We have wonderful daughters, but we also want to be good. We want to be good dads to them, and so that requires energy. And so all these things require energy, and so it's a matter of saving up enough of the energy so that we could get, and the money and time, all that kind of stuff, right? Because we, you have to make it work. You have to pull it all together.
But did you know what you were doing? Because you know what I mean? Like, you weren't doing this before, and so now you were doing something new. And was there like a ramp up of like, we don't really know what we're doing, and then a month later, okay, now we kind of figure out how this process works and how to actually, with all of these things that you were discussing in the process, that sounds very sophisticated, and it doesn't sound like you could just go from a start to doing all of those things. It would be a big ramp up. Is that accurate?
I think there are some things that I think just came completely naturally.
Okay.
Where I'm trying to think of something very specific, but it's because we're both creative, that we're both artists. I write fiction and I design choose your own adventure stories, and Greg's like graphic designer and a storyteller, and so we didn't have to learn to let go and trust the creative process. I felt very comfortable from the get-go. I was like I was like a teenager in my head, like this sort of giddy, excited, like I'm in the studio. This is like a dream come true. And I think we sort of like just hit the ground running. And so I don't think I had to learn
Okay.
how to create the technical stuff. Sure. Like,
Yeah.
like how should I singing into a mic in a booth is different to singing on a stage.
But I'll offer a counterpoint to that a little bit. Like those discovery sessions I was mentioning before, where we would get everyone together and kind of find the song. That was something we discovered a few months into the studio process. And then the other place I would say there was kind of the we didn't know what we were doing to, I felt like by the end we're in a very different place. So I mentioned our producer Julie and Stacy. You know, at the beginning of the 2-year process of being in the studio, we definitely were the songwriters coming in and working with some amazing musicians to hopefully bring our stories alive. That's where we started, right? And working with this great producer to bring our stories alive. I would say about, 9 months into the process, Julian turned to us one day and he said, so you guys absolutely are going to have co-producer credit on this because you guys are producers.
Okay.
Like this is something you're good at, of hearing and bringing the right kinds of sounds, the right kinds of references, because we always use references in our art of like, this is sort of the Purple Rain of the album, or, whatever the case is, right? But point being, there was a journey for us of absolutely, I would have never called myself a producer.
That's true.
To by the end of the 2 years, we absolutely, we produced the album with Julie, and it wasn't just
Right.
the singing and the guitar playing that we brought to the album.
So you guys were obviously creative, before you did this. Has this experience like shifted the way you approach other creative endeavors?
Absolutely. Mine is super simple. I feel like I trust myself more now.
Okay.
I've always been super self-critical. I'm still self-critical. But I feel like I really have a different level of trusting my instincts now in non-musical pursuits as well, which has been really interesting.
That's awesome. That's amazing. That's an amazing result from this experience.
I would agree.
Yeah.
It makes me happy. I still second guess myself. I'm not saying that at all, but I trust myself more. Let's say that.
Okay, great.
I think for me, the sort of what have I learned, or what do I apply this experience to? How do I apply this experience to other aspects of my creative life? I think for me it's the collaboration, like we were talking about before. This when you work really close with someone like Greg and I have, we have to. It's not just trusting ourselves; it's trusting each other. And so that when the other person says, hey, there's something not quite right here, just being really open to say, and just to trust, like, okay, let's just like go down another path. Let's try something new.
I'm way better at taking feedback than the beginning of the process. That's for sure. It's you have to get better at it.
Yeah.
But feedback, as I used the word earlier, as a gift. Like we give each other things, and so I feel like it's like criticism. It's such a dirty word, but it's a gift. It's there to just find that beauty that we're all looking for.
Criticism is a gift. That may be the one of the key quotes of the interview. That's a good one. Would you think of this endeavor as something that was like a scary thing that you went into, or was it something that you went into with confidence? And where I'm going with this is I'm thinking about other people who are creative and thinking about taking a leap or a jump or taking a risk. And I'm thinking about, what they can take from your story, and what they could learn from it.
Totally scary. Totally. But that's part of the amazingness, right? So how it's bloody scary to put out these lyrics that represent really personal parts of our lived experiences, and that's scary. But then it's not just the lyrics. It's this is how we're hearing a particular song. And I mean, there's always that fear that someone's gonna find this cheesy or just really trite, and so we would obviously check each other. Maybe this is something that we just wouldn't have been able to do alone, because we've had each other literally sort of like whispering into each other's ears, like, is this okay? Are we doing this right? Is this the way this should sound? And so, oh my God, it's totally scary, but everything should be scary. If something's not scary, then we're not pushing ourselves, right? I tell my daughter, like, if you're nervous about something, it means you care about it.
Yes.
If you're not nervous, then you're not growing and you don't care. You need to find something that you're really nervous about and then do that.
And I would just add to that, there was also a layer of hopefulness in here. So there, as you were asking that question, there's this quote by Evelyn Waugh, who wrote Brideshead Revisited, that is one of my go-to quotes. And I can't say it perfectly, but the abridged version is basically, I went to this city with this hope that I would find this low door in the wall that I knew others had found before me, that opened onto this enchanted garden in the heart of the city. And it's this search that maybe I'll, via this process, find something magical and true, and something that I've heard existed, but I wasn't quite sure. So it's funny. The subject matter was really scary, because I had never, ever written songs that were so personal. I had never written anything that I've written songs since I was 17. I've never written a song about telling the world that I went through a domestic violence situation and how hard that was and how angry it made me and how tough it was and scary. But the process itself of telling that story to me was hopeful. I was always looking for that low door in the wall. Like, I wanted to find that same garden.
Do you think you did?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It feels like I did. It just feels good. There's something, at the end of the day, I think all art has this subjective quality, and you put it out in the world, and you hope things for it. It's like you hope things for your child. You hope things for your family members. You know, it feels that personal, right? But I'm so proud that these songs are out there in the world.
Great. Are there any bits of advice or guidance or tips that you would give to people that are in a creative situation and creative environment, and they are considering doing something scary or doing something with risk, kind of like where you are?
So for me, my biggest sort of piece of advice would be, and I think Anne Lamott wrote about this in her book Bird by Bird on fiction writing, that you have to sort of learn to love the shitty draft. You have to expect that the first thing that comes out is not going to be even close to perfect, but if there's something in you that just needs to be out there, get it out there, and then keep working on it and keep working on it and keep working on it, because eventually, even if it takes a long time, eventually you're going to create something beautiful, but you have to get it out of yourself first.
And I love this idea of what is great, right? Because I definitely don't have all the answers to this question in terms of sage wisdom for the creative process. But the one thing I would share that I have internalized that I think would be helpful to a lot of people is just the simple idea of what you create is a very personal gift to the world. Not everyone is going to love it. It is not going to be everyone's cup of tea. And that's a very logical thing if we all think about it, right? We don't all love every single song we hear. We don't all love every single movie that we see. But those songs and those movies are super personal to the people who created them, right? But if we can have that relationship with our art, that be proud of it, be bold in putting it out there, tell your stories, understand that some people will connect with them, right? But it's okay that not everyone connects with them, and that's just part of the world of creativity. And I think a lot of people get trapped in the idea of they hear any kind of feedback to the negative and they go into a hole of not wanting to put more out, and it's the exact opposite.
Right. Or non-response.
Or
non-response. Or not getting a response.
Right.
Keep making art.
That is great advice. So I've been listening to this album for the past 2 weeks, and I thought one way about it. And now I think, after talking to you guys, I think a little bit differently. I kind of feel like it's a storybook. I was thinking of you guys as musicians, and now I think of you as storytellers after speaking with you. And I feel like it's like a book of small little fairy tales and stories that with illustrations. That's how I see it now.
That's about the best compliment we could possibly get. That's incredible. Because it effectively is. It's funny you say that, because we would describe the album that way, especially as we got to the finish line and we said, there's kind of 10 stories here, and we would talk to the musicians about telling the stories. And so, whether it is a story about a new love, or it's a story about
being kicked out of home.
Yeah, a story about losing, Dungeons and Dragons is a story about losing a childhood friend, and these are all, they're all little stories, and so I love that you said that.
I think we're. What's funny is I've never had the real confidence, maybe until now, until like a month ago when the album was actually out in the world, to actually say I'm a musician. But I don't think that really matters, whether we are musicians or not. So if people hear our songs as stories, it feels like that's more important than than perceiving us as being musicians.
That makes sense that you would think that you would value that more based on talking to you. So Danny and Greg, thank you so much. This has been really thrilling and awesome for me to talk to you guys. I don't think I've ever listened to music and got so attached to it, and then to be able to speak to the people that created it. And I was talking to you out in the hall. I went to your release party, and during that, which by the way was amazing. So the release party was everyone had wireless headphones, so when you walk into the space at Meeting House Tavern, I walk in and it's completely silent, and everybody has on these headphones with blue lights, and I'm like, what the heck have I gotten myself into? And it was because everyone was listening to the music, and then you guys would get up and you would give the background on each, tell the story about each song, and then everyone would got to listen to it. And it was brilliant because everyone was not talking. They weren't socializing. They were listening to your music, and they were also listening to the music at the highest fidelity and quality they could because it's on headphones. What I wish, though, is I wish I had listened to everything beforehand, because it would have been so wonderful to hear all of that commentary that you provided that night. If I had already been exposed to the songs, I was hearing them for the first time that night.
Right.
So, but thank you guys so much. This was been really great.
Our
Total pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
You can learn more about They Won't Win at theywontwin.com. Lost at Sea is available wherever you buy or listen to music: Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube Music, and Amazon. My name is Ricky McGuckran, and you have been listening to Eager to Know, the podcast. If you haven't already, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join me next week for another Eager to Know podcast.